Our first case, Tamara Williams, a phlebotomist with a warm smile and a travel agent's eye for escape. That was how close friends described Tamara Williams before the autumn of 2018. She worked in medical clinics, drew blood with a steady hand, and planned escapes for travelers dreaming of far-off shores. She was also part of the Order of the Eastern Star, a fraternal group with connections across the country. To anyone on the outside, she seemed completely ordinary, reliable, well-connected, and harmless. But behind that carefully constructed normalcy, a dark horror was unfolding inside a Melvindale apartment, transforming her into one of the most wanted fugitives in America. David Carter was 39 years old, a dedicated father, and a volunteer youth football coach in Melvindale. He worked full-time at an automotive plant while also launching his own lifestyle clothing brand, Lavish Habits Unlimited. Those who knew him described a serious yet fun-loving man who took immense pride in his work. In September of 2018, he lived in the Gale Gardens apartments in Melvindale, a quiet Detroit suburb where neighbors knew one another and kids played in shared courtyards. So when David missed his shift on September 30th, his coworkers immediately sensed that something was terribly wrong. He was not the type to just disappear. Days later, on October 1st, drivers traveling down Interstate 75 near Findlay, Ohio, over 100 miles from Detroit, made a gruesome discovery. Inside a sleeping bag tossed on the roadside lay human remains. The medical examiner soon confirmed their worst fears. It was David Carter. The details were sickening. His body had been dismembered and scattered in multiple locations. This was no simple crime of passion. If we look closer, it was a cold, calculated, and methodical execution. Back in Michigan, investigators immediately focused their attention on David's girlfriend of 6 months, Tamara Williams. Witnesses noted that she had been an almost constant presence in his life, right up until he vanished. Then, she suddenly vanished too. When police briefly questioned her, she claimed she had no idea what happened to him. But as detectives dug into her alibi, inconsistencies quickly began to surface. On December 20th, 2018, a felony warrant officially charged her with first-degree murder, mutilating a corpse, and tampering with evidence. By that point, however, Williams had completely vanished. She was last spotted in Ann Arbor, Michigan on October 16th, withdrawing cash and eating at a restaurant over 2 weeks after David's body was found. Investigators tracked her trail to a train heading for Brooklyn, New York, where she checked into the Neptune Hotel. She walked out of that hotel on October 18th and vanished into thin air, right before police could make an arrest. Since that day, Tamara Williams has slipped through the fingers of law enforcement, leaving a trail that crosses state lines and international borders. Detectives later discovered she had deep personal ties to Brooklyn and Atlanta, places where she could easily fade into the crowd and rely on her secret fraternal network. Her skills as a travel agent taught her exactly how to move undetected between cities, while her medical training allowed her to potentially find cash-paying work off the grid. In 2021, the United States Marshals made this a priority case, offering $25,000 for information leading to her arrest. That same year, her face appeared on America's Most Wanted with John Walsh, pulling her crimes into the national spotlight. Later, the case was broadcast on Investigation Discovery's In Pursuit and Netflix's hit show, Unsolved Mysteries. Though the broadcasts brought in hundreds of leads, none paid off. She had seemingly mastered the art of staying invisible, frequently altering her appearance, avoiding any digital footprint, and always keeping one step ahead of the law. Police suspect she has completely changed her hair color and style to avoid being recognized. They also believe she is likely living under a stolen identity, perhaps supported by people who have no idea she is wanted. Her mother, a retired Detroit Fire Union treasurer named Verdine Day, was later accused of stealing over $200,000, and court records suggest she may have helped fund her daughter's life on the run. Even though no charges were filed for aiding a fugitive, David's father, Elton, continues to fight for justice. He often speaks of his son as a devoted dad who would never abandon his teenage boy. As we look back at David's life, we remember a father who is still waiting for his final justice. He was a hard-working man and a fiercely loyal friend. His sister, Taja Carter Jackson, called him her absolute best friend, the one person whose advice she always relied on. For his family, the lack of an arrest has meant endless grief without any closure. In September 2023, Tamara Williams was added to the U.S. Marshals' 15 Most Wanted Fugitives list, a designation reserved for the country's most dangerous and high-profile fugitives. U.S. Marshals Director Ronald Davis publicly declared her capture a top priority, stating that David Carter's family deserved justice. Owen Cipher, the U.S. Marshal for Eastern Michigan, vowed to hunt her down, promising to be relentless no matter how long it took. This massive investigation spanned 5 states, requiring deep coordination with local, state, and federal authorities. More than 71 officers worked the case. Yet despite this massive dragnet, Williams remains free in 2026. She is described as 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighing around 190 pounds, with black hair, brown eyes, and rose tattoos on her left shoulder. Authorities warn she is armed and highly dangerous. Her story has become a chilling reminder of how easily someone can vanish into thin air today. Even with advanced tracking technology and global databases at their disposal, it proves that some fugitives slip away not with complex plans, but through sheer patience, calculation, and a quiet network of help shielding them from the law. For the Carter family, each day without justice is another day stolen from their healing. For investigators, Tamara Williams remains a frustratingly unfinished chapter, a cold case that won't close, until she answers for what occurred in that Melvindale apartment back in the autumn of 2018. But while one fugitive evades justice, a dark chapter from Detroit's history proves that even the most elusive killers eventually face a reckoning. Case 2, Carl Eugene Watts. He preferred the name Coral, a nickname reflecting his deep Southern roots. For nearly 10 years, he slipped between Michigan and Texas like a ghost, leaving a wake of terror that police would spend decades trying to piece together. Carl Eugene Watts was neither loud nor flashy, never seeking the spotlight. He was quiet, blending in, completely forgettable, precisely the sort of predator who could haunt a neighborhood without raising any alarm. Yet between 1974 and 1982, detectives believe he took the lives of over 100 women, potentially making him the most prolific serial killer in American history. Born in Ken, Texas, in November 1953, Watts moved to Detroit as a young boy after his parents split up. His mother later married a mechanic named Norman Caesar, and they settled in Inkster, Michigan, where she taught high school art. Watts deeply resented his new stepfather, quickly growing to feel like an isolated outsider in his own house. Then, around age 8 or 9, he contracted meningitis, a brutal brain infection that sidelined him from school for a year. Afterwards, his family noticed a dramatic, dark shift in his personality. He grew deeply withdrawn, battled insomnia, and struggled to focus or remember. In his early teens, he developed horrifying fantasies about women, believing they possessed evil eyes and required freeing. His earliest violent offenses began while he was still just a teenager. By age 20, he had served prison time for assaulting 2 women. Released in 1976, he returned to Inkster, and the attacks quickly resumed. Only this time, his methods were far more calculated and lethal. In April 1980, 17-year-old Shirley Small was found dead outside her Ann Arbor home, brutally attacked. Just 3 months later, 26-year-old Glenda Richmond met a similar tragic fate near her Ann Arbor summer cottage. That September, 30-year-old Rebecca Huff, a University of Michigan graduate student, was found slain on her doorstep. The pattern was terrifying, and the timing was deeply chilling. Most of his strikes occurred on Sunday mornings around 4 a.m., prompting newspapers to dub him the Sunday morning slasher. Terrified communities panicked, and Michigan college campuses issued urgent warnings. Local women altered their daily routines, stopped walking alone, and bought heavy locks and alarms. Retired Assistant Attorney General Donna Pendergrass, a student at the University of Michigan back then, remembered it as a truly terrifying year. A task force launched in July 1980 to investigate the early morning killings, and by November, detectives placed Watts under tight surveillance after marking him as a prime suspect. On November 15, 1980, 2 Ann Arbor patrol officers spotted a brown Pontiac Grand Prix tailing a young woman walking home. Sensing a shadow behind her, The woman ducked into a dark doorway, praying her stalker would just keep walking. Instead, patrol officers pulled the car over for expired tags and a suspended driver's license. The driver was Carl Watts. Lacking the evidence to keep him locked up, detectives slipped a tracker under his vehicle. But before they could build a solid case, Watts packed up and fled to Texas. In May 1982, he broke into a Houston area home and assaulted two women, Lori Listister and Melinda Aguilar. Miraculously, both survived by fighting him off and escaping his grasp. That same day, he assaulted another woman, but police captured him shortly after. The officers had no clue they had just captured one of the most prolific killers in history. Texas prosecutors ultimately charged Watts with burglary and attempted murder. Under questioning, he confessed to 13 more murders in exchange for immunity and a 60-year sentence, a deal that would go down as one of the most controversial plea bargains in American history. He shared horrifying details about how he got rid of his victims' bodies, burying some, throwing others in dumpsters, and leaving one in a murky swamp. He claimed he had killed at least 40 women, refusing to admit to more because he hated the label of a mass murderer. But under that immunity deal, despite admitting to over a dozen murders, Watts could walk free in 2006 after serving his time. The terrifying prospect devastated the victims' families and horrified law enforcement across several states. But Michigan prosecutors simply refused to let him walk free. In 2002, hearing of his potential release, Michigan Assistant Attorney General Donna Pendergrass reopened cold cases linked to him. A witness named Joseph Foy came forward, claiming that back in 1979, he had watched a small-framed man attack Helen Dutcher. And that man was Watts. Michigan prosecutors filed charges, and in November 2004, a jury convicted him of first-degree murder. 3 years later, in July 2007, another Michigan jury convicted him of murdering Gloria Steele. He received life without parole. Then, on September 21, 2007, Carl Eugene Watts died from prostate cancer while serving his time at the Ionia Maximum Correctional Facility. He was 53. Sadly, he never stood trial for the vast majority of his suspected crimes. Police link him to 90 unsolved cold cases, and experts believe his true victim count exceeds 100, crossing state lines and international borders. The Watts case exposed massive failures in how different states share information about traveling predators. It showed how immunity deals, meant to bring answers, can sometimes cause more pain than closure. It serves as a dark reminder that some killers can live right among us for years, completely undetected, until the right witness or a single piece of evidence finally drags them into the light. Though Watts finally faced justice, his dark legacy remains a haunting reminder of how close he came to escaping punishment and the relentless heroes who stopped him. But while Michigan authorities fought to hold a monster accountable, another Detroit figure was busy abusing a different kind of trust. This was the trial of Kwame Kilpatrick. He exploded onto the local political scene with endless charisma, raw confidence, and a microphone in hand. At 32 years old, Kwame Kilpatrick became the youngest mayor in Detroit history, and he loved the spotlight. Flaunting custom suits and a diamond earring, he rolled with an entourage that made him look more like a rock star than a mayor. Branding himself as America's first hip-hop mayor, he constantly urged the city to rise up with him. That message struck a chord with residents hungry for fresh energy and a leader who actually looked like the future. Yet beneath the high-energy speeches and the swagger, Kilpatrick was building something far darker than a political campaign. He was running a criminal enterprise backed by his powerful, politically connected family. With his mother, Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, serving in Congress, Kwame seemed absolutely destined for greatness. He represented the 9th District in the Michigan House from 1997 to 2002 before running for mayor. His 2002 victory was celebrated as a turning point for Detroit, a city drowning in economic ruin. The new mayor promised revitalization, transparency, and real hope. Instead, he brought corruption so massive it would shock even the most cynical citizens. Right at the heart of this conspiracy was Bobby Ferguson, a local contractor and the mayor's close friend. Together, they built what federal investigators would later call a pay-to-play scheme. To do business with the city of Detroit, especially its water department, contractors had to include Ferguson in their deals. Any refusal meant rejected bids, frozen proposals, or finding themselves completely shut out of the city. But if they complied, Ferguson landed massive contracts, and Kilpatrick pocketed illegal kickbacks. It was pure extortion masked as city leadership, and it went on for years. Feds opened an investigation into Kilpatrick in 2004, only 2 years into his first term. Informants and cooperative defendants from other cases exposed the pay-to-play racket, naming the mayor as the mastermind. For several years, agents from the FBI, IRS, and other agencies deployed wiretaps, undercover stings, and deep financial audits to build their case. What they uncovered was shockingly bold. The duo siphoned over $500,000 from the state of Michigan and charity donors through nonprofits they controlled, like the Kilpatrick Civic Fund and his mayoral campaign. Those funds were meant to help the community and fund official campaign runs. Instead, the cash bankrolled 5-star resort trips, spa days, yoga classes, and expensive golf clubs. Prosecutors later calculated that Kilpatrick spent over $840,000 on top of his official salary. His defense lawyer tried to frame this fortune as sweet birthday and holiday gifts from loving political backers. The jury did not buy it. Text messages soon laid bare the staggering corruption. In one text, Kilpatrick and Ferguson plotted to rig bids so Ferguson would secure lucrative city contracts. When confronted, the mayor insisted those messages were completely taken out of context. But the state painted a darker picture, a cold, calculated scheme to turn public office into private wealth. An FBI agent later noted that crime had simply become a way of life for the mayor, who tirelessly used his official power to chase down fresh illegal opportunities to make money. In September 2008, Kilpatrick stepped down as mayor, pleading guilty to 2 felony counts of obstruction for trying to cover up his secret affair. He served 99 days in jail before being paroled, but that was only the start. In May 2010, he got 18 months to 5 years for violating probation. Then, in January 2011, federal authorities hit him with 38 counts of racketeering, extortion, and fraud. His father, Bernard, and co-conspirator Bobby Ferguson were indicted too. Their trial began in September 2012 and lasted for months. The prosecution called a parade of witnesses who exposed a toxic culture of bribery, kickbacks, and raw intimidation. In March 2013, after 14 days of deliberation, the jury came back, guilty on 24 of 30 counts. A heavy silence fell over the courtroom as the verdicts were read. Kilpatrick stood stone-faced. Ferguson was convicted on 9 of his 11 felony counts. In October 2013, Judge Nancy Edmonds handed Kilpatrick 28 years in federal prison, a massive sentence fitting his incredibly bold crimes. The judge pointed out that the former mayor had shown zero remorse, zero accountability, and no real contrition. Government prosecutors emphasized that even after years of intense legal battles, there was absolutely no proof Kilpatrick ever accepted blame for his actions, nor did he offer any apology to the city. The fallout was devastating as Detroit hurtled toward bankruptcy in 2013. Emergency manager Kevin Auer pointed to this deep corruption to show why Detroit officials could not be trusted to manage public funds. The scandal became a dark symbol of broken trust and total public betrayal. In response, Michigan voters overwhelmingly changed the state constitution to slap a 20-year ban on corrupt officials, blocking them from holding any office that manages public money or policy. Kilpatrick was sent away to a federal correctional facility in El Reno, Oklahoma. He served 7 years before President Donald Trump commuted his sentence in January 2021, hours before leaving office. The move was highly controversial, triggering fury among Detroit residents who felt the former mayor had stolen from a city already on the brink. Since getting out, he has kept a quiet profile, but financial records show a highly troubling pattern. He was ordered to pay over $823,000 in restitution to Detroit taxpayers. As of 2026, he has paid virtually nothing. Court files show he earns $120,000 annually from a Tennessee nonprofit, Taking Action for Good. He lives in a mansion his wife bought through a shell company and drives around in luxury cars. Yet despite having plenty of cash and assets, he claims he cannot afford his court-ordered restitution. Federal prosecutors accuse him of hiding behind family members to shield his wealth and dodge his legal duties. The Kilpatrick scandal did more than drain Detroit's cash. It shattered trust in local government. It proved that corruption does not always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes it marches in broad daylight, bold enough to believe power offers total protection. Ultimately, Kilpatrick's dramatic rise and fall serves as a dark, cautionary tale. Build your empire on a foundation of lies, and the eventual collapse is always devastating. But as we transition past the greed of Kilpatrick, you and I must confront a different predator who hunted Detroit's most vulnerable. Case number 4, D'Angelo Martin. Abandoned homes dotted Detroit's east side like rotting, open wounds. Roofs caved in, windows shattered, and walls rotted away from years of neglect. These forgotten structures, once lively family homes, had become desperate shelters for people living on society's outer margins. Deep inside these decaying spaces, far from prying eyes, D'Angelo Martin established his private hunting ground. Between February 2018 and June 2019, he lured 4 women into those empty buildings, and not one survived. Born in May 1985, Martin grew up fighting to survive in Detroit. In 1999, his mother, Chantrine Barker, got life in prison when he was only 14. Left on his own, he bounced between his grandparents and the streets, battling a growing drug addiction. Before even turning 18, he had regular run-ins with the police, but none of his crimes kept him locked up for long. Yet investigators missed the truth. Martin had been leaving obvious warning signs for more than a decade. Alarm bells that an exhausted, underfunded police department ignored. In 2004, Martin attacked 41-year-old Sylvia Sampson while she walked on Detroit's east side. Dragging her into a car, he later abandoned her in an empty field with horrific injuries. A DNA kit was collected, but it gathered dust in a warehouse for years, just one of 11,000 backlogged kits discovered in 2009. When tested in 2012, it pointed directly to Martin's DNA. Yet Detroit detectives took no immediate action. Sampson died of natural causes before they could charge him, so in 2016, police closed the case because she could no longer testify. Then, in December 2015, Martin brutally assaulted a 50-year-old woman inside an abandoned house on Detroit's east side. Her assault kit, tested in 2016, yielded another direct DNA match to him. That same year, a prosecutor emailed the department, warning them of a potential serial predator active in the area. Still, the cases were never linked or escalated properly. A third assault in 2017 matched Martin as well, but detectives could not find the paperwork and just gave up. These horrific errors sparked a 247-page internal affairs report. Written after his 2019 arrest, it detailed what bosses termed a complete and total breakdown in tracing critical DNA leads. By then, however, a terrifying spree had begun. Let us look at how it all started in February 2018. He coaxed 57-year-old Annetta Nelson into a vacant home on Winthrop Street. On February 26th, a homeless man found her body. He dragged her remains to the sidewalk to ensure she would be seen. Investigators locked that man up first, but let him go a week later when security footage proved his innocence. In May 2018, forensic tests matched crime scene DNA to Martin. Detectives claimed they tried tracking him down, but they never got a warrant to secure his DNA and confirm the match. Experts blasted this crucial blunder. Over the next 12 months, Martin kept hunting. In March 2019, he met 52-year-old Nancy Harrison. After taking drugs together, he coaxed her into another empty building. Her body was discovered there on March 19th. In late April, Matei did the exact same thing to 55-year-old Trevizine Ellis. Her badly decomposed body was found on May 24th. At every scene, police recovered dark clues linking the murders together. On May 6, 2019, Martin ran into a 26-year-old woman at a local drug house. He lured her back to his place and violently assaulted her, but she fought back fiercely and escaped. Her escape changed everything. She gave detectives a vivid, highly detailed description of her attacker. When detectives gathered evidence from the crime scene, it matched the DNA from all 4 previous cases. On June 5th, the body of 55-year-old Tamara Jones was discovered in an abandoned home on Mack Avenue, beaten to death. The city was on edge as police sent teams to scour over 3,000 abandoned properties for more victims. On June 7, 2019, Martin was arrested at a bus stop near 7 Mile Road and Gratiot Avenue on the east side. The arrest followed a massive manhunt that left Detroit residents terrified to step outside their own front doors. Prosecutors charged Martin with 4 counts of first-degree premeditated murder, 4 counts of felony murder, and various other serious offenses. He also faced charges for the brutal May attack on the 26-year-old woman who managed to survive. During the investigation, prosecutors connected him to at least 2 other unsolved homicides, although no charges were ever filed for those crimes. In September 2022, Martin accepted a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to 4 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of assault, receiving 45 to 70 years in prison. This agreement spared the victims' families a painful trial, ensuring Martin would spend the rest of his life behind bars. At his sentencing on October 6, 2022, the victims' family members finally got to speak. Gary Harrison, Nancy Harrison's father, spoke of the crushing impact on their family. Her daughter, Lisa Onestrider, expressed deep grief and anger. "I've waited 3 years for this day," she said, addressing Martin directly. "The day that you rot in the place you belong." Another relative remarked that Martin proved why Michigan needed to bring back harsher punishments. An internal affairs report released after Martin's arrest exposed the systemic failures that allowed him to keep hunting for so long. Officers were confused about how many incidents actually defined a repeat offender. They hesitated to reapproach victims to secure cooperation, and failed to properly track DNA evidence. No errors rose to the level of criminal conduct, the report concluded. Still, several officers neglected their duties and 2 received brief suspensions. Police Commander Michael McInnes, who led the homicide unit, admitted the department should have done better. "We learned from our mistakes and resolved to do better," the commander stated. But for the families of Annetta Nelson, Nancy Harrison, Trevine Ellis, and Tamara Jones, no apology could ever bring their loved ones back. Martin's case became a chilling symbol of how institutional failures let predators hunt unchecked, leaving vulnerable populations to pay the ultimate price. While Martin's horrific crimes played out in the shadows of abandoned buildings, another Detroit case would soon prove that danger also lurks behind the closed doors of wealth and privilege. Case 5, Desmond Burks. The Boston Edison Historic District stands as one of Detroit's most prestigious neighborhoods. Tree-lined streets and sprawling mansions, home to wealthy residents whose success is as manicured as their flawless lawns. Here, doctors, business executives, and philanthropists live in quiet seclusion, their privacy guarded by high gates and old money. Then, on April 23, 2023, that peaceful illusion shattered when police discovered the lifeless body of Dr. Devin Hoover, a brilliant, world-renowned neurosurgeon wrapped in a carpet and hidden inside his own attic crawl space. He had been shot to death, and the prime suspect was a man he once trusted completely. At 53 years old, Dr. Hoover was a widely respected neurosurgeon at Ascension Hospital, celebrated for his immense skill, deep compassion, and dedication. He spent lavishly on designer watches worth tens of thousands of dollars, drove a white Range Rover, and owned an historic home valued well into 6 figures. To colleagues and friends, he was the absolute picture of success. But behind closed doors, investigators would soon discover a personal life far more complicated than anyone ever realized. The investigation kicked off on April 22nd, when Detroit police responded to complaints about an SUV blocking a West Side driveway, just 5 miles from Hoover's home. Upon arrival, they located Hoover's abandoned white Range Rover, with highly suspicious evidence scattered inside. The luxury vehicle was towed, and officers headed straight to Hoover's mansion that evening to conduct a welfare check. They discovered the driveway gate swung open and spotted what looked like deep stains on the back door, but nobody answered their knocks. The next day, April 23rd, Hoover's panicked family requested another urgent welfare check. The doctor had missed a crucial trip to visit his dying mother, and they knew something was terribly wrong. Once inside the house, police made a horrifying discovery. Hoover lay face down in an attic crawl space, wearing only socks and wrapped in a heavy carpet. An autopsy later confirmed that he was fatally shot. His designer watches, wallet, cards, and phone were gone. Days later, police focused on a 34-year-old named Desmond Burks. On April 28th, investigators brought him in for questioning. Detectives soon discovered that Burks and Hoover had exchanged nearly 4,000 text messages, exposing a secret relationship between the two men. According to prosecutors, that secret bond had become highly complicated. This hidden relationship quickly became the absolute center of the entire investigation. While Burks was being questioned, someone broke into Hoover's home overnight between April 29th and April 30th. Police never revealed if anything was stolen, but the timing was incredibly suspicious. On May 2nd, 2023, Burks was let go without any charges. Back then, prosecutors lacked the evidence to charge him. For the next 15 months, detectives quietly built their case. The massive investigation spanned 5 states. It touched Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Texas, California, and 3 nations: the United States, England, and France. At least 71 officers from various agencies joined the manhunt, producing a massive 181-page report. Many witnesses refused to share deeply personal details, making it incredibly difficult for the state to build the case. Eventually, the puzzle pieces started coming together. Digital data from Hoover's cell phone revealed that on the day of his murder, his device traveled to Burks's neighborhood on Sussex Street, then to Fairlane Mall in Dearborn, and never went back home. We can track how multiple pieces of evidence placed the doctor's phone right beside Desmond Burks. Surveillance footage captured Burks parking Hoover's high-end Range Rover right near where police later found it on Coyle Street. He allegedly left a fingerprint on the SUV before limping away with a heavy backpack. Right after Hoover's death, someone drained over $30,000 from his bank accounts using fraudulent transactions. Watches worth $67,000 were found at residences linked to Burks. Witnesses testified that within 8 minutes of the estimated time of the attack, Burks began spending the doctor's money. Days later, Burks was spotted with a second phone, buying expensive jewelry, sending cash to people, and flaunting expensive goods. One witness recalled him showing off a watch, bragging, "That's big money." He was actively flaunting it. In August 2024, over a year after the murder, prosecutor Kim Worthy officially charged Desmond Burks. He was arraigned on first-degree premeditated murder charges, along with felony murder, larceny of over $20,000, computer crimes, possession of a weapon by a felon, and several other counts. The judge held him without bond. But as we look closer, Burks faced other serious charges. In April 2024, while still under investigation for Hoover's murder, he got into a road rage dispute in Dearborn after a driver accidentally bumped the back of his vehicle, and after a brief argument, Burks allegedly punched 67-year-old Rieta Salai, leaving him unconscious in the street. Sales was rushed to the hospital but died from his injuries on May 11th. Burks faced second-degree murder charges for that crime too. Meanwhile, his trial for Hoover's murder was set for January 2026. Jury selection began on January 20th, with over 100 potential jurors packing into the courtroom. Though the trial was expected to last 6 weeks, just 2 days into jury selection, on January 22nd, Burks made a shocking move. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in Hoover's case, along with larceny, computer crimes, and weapons charges. In exchange, the state dismissed the first-degree murder charge. He also pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter in the Riel case. Under the plea deal, Burks faces 35 to 60 years for killing Hoover, plus 5 more years on weapons charges. Scheduled for sentencing on February 20th, 2026, his sudden plea spared Hoover's family a grueling and painful trial. In a public statement, they shared their relief that Burks admitted his guilt and would remain locked away for life. Still, nothing can ever bring Devon back. Their heartbreaking statement read, "The ones who are truly suffering now are his would-be patients." Carol Gove, a close friend of Hoover's, admitted she was stunned by the plea, adding that she felt incredibly relieved it was finally over. The thought of testifying had brought overwhelming anxiety, but immense relief followed knowing the killer would be locked away for the rest of his life. Yet, even with that guilty plea, questions still linger about his motive. Prosecutors suggested jealousy and Hoover's massive wealth played a role, but the full truth of what occurred in that Boston Edison mansion may never be understood. What remains certain is that a respected neurosurgeon, a man who dedicated his entire life to healing others, met a violent end from someone he had trusted completely. and that trust, once broken, can never be restored. But as Burks' case draws to a close, other dark stories from Detroit's history wait to be uncovered. Case 6. Richard Worse, Jr. At 14 years old, most teens worry about homework, friends, and school clothes. But Richard Worse, Jr. was just trying to stay alive. The year was 1984, and the FBI had just recruited him to infiltrate Detroit's most brutal drug gangs, making him the youngest known informant in the Bureau's history. They dubbed him White Boy Rick, a title bestowed not by the streets, but by a media machine that would later frame him as a cautionary tale. For 2 years, the teen survived in a world where a single wrong word meant certain death, where adults twice his age trusted him with secrets worth millions, and where the very handlers who recruited him promised safety they never delivered. But Worre was raised on Detroit's East Side during the crack epidemic, a working-class kid in a neighborhood consumed by drugs and violence. His father, Richard Wershe Sr., had his own quiet dealings with the law, and when FBI agents arrived at their door in 1984 with photos of local dealers, 14-year-old Rick recognized every single face. The agents saw an opportunity, while the boy saw a quick paycheck. His father saw a chance to put food on the table and keep his son off the streets. None of them saw the trap closing. Before long, the FBI trained young Worre in the art of deep deception. They taught him how to buy drugs, how to deal them, and how to navigate the city's dark underworld without triggering any suspicion. They supplied him with federal funds specifically to buy evidence for future court trials, introducing the young teen to Johnny Curry and his crew, some of the most feared drug kingpins in Detroit. The agents pushed him to get close, and he did. Rick became so deeply embedded that Agent John Anthony later admitted he was the most productive informant the FBI had in Detroit. He helped secure more than 20 convictions of major figures. At only 15 years old, being highly useful made him a major target. In November 1984, Worre was approached by a rival who suspected he was cooperating with police. They took him to an intersection north of Interstate 94 and confronted him. He was shot, suffering severe internal injuries. Survival was pure luck. Yet instead of pulling him out and protecting the endangered child, the FBI pressured him to keep going. They still needed him. Since the active cases weren't closed, the boy stayed. At 15, Worre uncovered something far more explosive than drug deals. He found out Johnny Curry's crew had taken the life of 13-year-old Damon Lucas, and that prominent Detroit police inspector Gil Hill, a rising political figure and future mayoral candidate, had accepted bribes to bury the homicide investigation. Wershe immediately reported this to his handlers. It was a massive revelation that should have made front-page headlines and triggered a sweeping federal corruption probe. Instead, it became the exact moment the FBI decided Rick was too dangerous to keep. Not to criminals, but to very powerful people. In 1986, when Worre was 16, the FBI abruptly stopped using him, offering no transition and zero protection. He had been trained on how to survive in the dangerous world they built for him, but never how to leave it. By then, he'd been shot, threatened, and watched friends vanish. In May 1987, at 17, he was pulled over in a routine traffic stop with 8 kilograms of a controlled substance and $30,000 in cash, leading to his arrest. He was convicted under Michigan's 650 lifer law, a harsh statute mandating life without parole for possessing over 650 grams. He was only 17 years old, destined to spend the next 3 decades of his life behind bars. Such a sentence was entirely unprecedented for a teenager convicted of a non-violent drug offense. While violent offenders who had actually taken lives were paroled after short sentences, Wershe remained locked up year after painful year. In 2003, he finally became eligible for parole after that 650 lifer law was overturned. Yet the Michigan Parole Board denied release, calling him a menace to society. Later investigations suggested Wershe's testimony about police corruption, particularly his details on Gil Hill, may have heavily influenced that decision. He had helped the government in their hour of need, and now they were ensuring he stayed silent. Even while locked up, Wershe kept cooperating, helping run sting operations right from his cell, targeting deep corruption that reached all the way to Detroit City Hall. Terrified of police retaliation, the government eventually placed him in the Federal Witness Protection Program. The government just kept using him, constantly promising his help would shorten his sentence, but those deals fell through. Then, in 2008, still locked up in Michigan, he was linked to a prison car theft ring, a charge he claimed he only took to protect his mother and sister from being indicted. In 2017, after 32 years, the longest stretch for any nonviolent juvenile in Michigan history, Wershe was finally paroled. But his freedom evaporated instantly. U.S. Marshals were waiting to ship him straight to Florida, where another sentence from that 2008 case lay ahead. He stayed behind bars until July 2020, walking free at 51. He had lost his entire youth and adulthood for a crime committed as a kid. Once free, Wershe did exactly what everyone warned him not to do. He fought back. In July 2021, exactly a year after his release, he sued the FBI, Detroit police, and several retired officers. His suit accused them of child exploitation, claiming they groomed him at 14 and thrust him into lethal danger, using him to build high-profile cases before discarding him when he became a threat to powerful people. He demanded $100 million in damages, roughly $3 million for every year he spent behind bars. His lawyers argued that without the government's recruitment, he never would have fallen into crime at all. But the lawsuit hit a wall immediately. State lawyers countered that the statute of limitations ran out decades ago, insisting Wershe should have sued long before. Wershe's defense argued he couldn't file from prison because he feared violent payback from the very officials he was targeting. In September 2023, U.S. District Judge Bem threw out both lawsuits, ruling that the claims were expired and that Wershe failed to show enough justification to bypass the legal time limit. An appeal followed, but by 2024, the Sixth Circuit Court heard arguments without issuing a final decision. The story of Richard Wershe Jr. inspired books, documentaries, and a 2018 Hollywood film starring Matthew McConaughey. Yet despite the spotlight, a dark question still remains. What responsibility does the system bear when it lures a child into deadly danger, only to toss him aside later? Wershe was never a drug kingpin or a violent mastermind, despite how the media painted him. He was just a 14-year-old kid who did what adults asked of him, paying for that choice with over 30 years of his life. Today, Wershe lives quietly, rebuilding a life that was stolen before it could ever truly begin. This case serves as a harsh reminder that the scales of justice are rarely balanced, that helping the police offers no real shield, and that the system often punishes whistleblowers far worse than the criminals themselves. Yet while Wershe's tragedy dragged on for decades, another man's reign of terror struck in months, leaving victims who never got to rebuild. Case 7. John Eric Armstrong. He looked like someone you'd forget the split second he passed by. With a slight, boyish face, he had an unassuming presence that faded into any crowd. Navy crewmates even nicknamed him Opie for his childlike innocence. Armstrong appeared completely harmless and polite, the sort of guy who would happily help change a flat tire or hold open a door. From 1999 to 2000, as he hunted along Detroit's Michigan Avenue and the Southwest Side rail yards, his innocent facade hid a dark, disturbing truth. A cold, calculated streak of violence linked him to at least 5 confirmed murders, and possibly dozens more worldwide. Born in New Bern, North Carolina, in November 1973, Armstrong entered a home already broken by trauma. His biological father was viciously abusive to him and his mother. Then, when he was 5, his baby brother died of sudden infant death syndrome. The crushing grief shattered them. Armstrong later claimed he tried to end his life shortly after, unable to handle the loss. Not long after, his father abandoned them entirely. He never got mental help for that trauma until his hospitalization in 1989, after barricading himself in a school bathroom following a stressful, high-pressure encounter with a female classmate. In 1992, at 18, Armstrong joined the Navy, serving as a petty officer aboard the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz. For 6 years, he sailed the globe, stopping in Seattle, Singapore, Thailand, Hong Kong, Hawaii, and Virginia. To his bunkmates, he seemed quiet, occasionally moody, but mostly just average. But they had no idea that during those travels, Armstrong was allegedly leaving a trail of bodies in almost every port. He later confessed to killing at least 11 women while in the Navy, though detectives could never verify all of his claims. Some thought he was exaggerating his body count, while others feared he was telling the absolute truth. After his discharge in 1998, Armstrong settled down in Dearborn Heights, Michigan. He enrolled at Schoolcraft College, worked at Target, and later took a job fueling planes at Detroit Metropolitan Airport. He got married, had 2 young kids, and seemed to live a perfectly normal, quiet life. Meanwhile, out on the streets of Detroit, women began to vanish. On January 2, 2000, Armstrong called the police, claiming he found a body in the local Rouge River. He said he felt sick and was stopping to relieve himself near the water when he spotted 39-year-old Wendy Jordan. Detectives questioned him briefly but let him walk away, a decision they would soon come to deeply regret. 3 months later, on April 2nd, a woman named Wilhelmia Drain climbed into Armstrong's black Jeep Wrangler. Instantly, she knew something was wrong. He lunged at her, but she managed to mace him and fight her way free. Just 5 days later, on April 7th, Armstrong offered a man named Devin Marcus $40. Once Marcus got inside, Armstrong tried to attack him too. Marcus fought back, escaped, and immediately called the police with a detailed description of the suspect and his vehicle. It was the exact break investigators needed. On April 10, 2000, 3 bodies were discovered in a southwest Detroit rail yard. All of them were vulnerable women. Each victim had been assaulted, and the killer had left behind crucial evidence linking the crime scenes together. The victims were soon identified as Robin Brown, Rosemary Felt, and Kelly Jean Hood. DNA evidence and witness accounts pointed straight to Armstrong's Jeep, leading to his arrest at his Dearborn Heights home on April 12th. Once in the interrogation room, Armstrong cracked fast. He confessed to the Detroit murders and admitted to several others across the globe. He laid out his process, how he lured women with cash, drove them to quiet spots, and brutally took their lives. He admitted he specifically targeted vulnerable street workers, assuming people wouldn't notice or report them missing right away. He even confessed to returning to some of those crime scenes later on. His confessions were incredibly detailed, told with a cold, flat tone that left investigators completely shaken. Prosecutors officially charged him with 5 murders in the Detroit area. The victims were Wendy Jordan, Robin Brown, Rosemary Felt, Monica Johnson, and Kelly Jean Hood. In March 2001, his first trial began. His defense lawyer tried to claim he was mentally ill and could not be held responsible for the killings. But the jury wasn't buying it. They found him guilty, sending him away for life without any hope of parole. Police in other states and overseas tried to look into his claims of other victims during his time in the Navy. Unfortunately, jurisdictional issues, 0 physical evidence, and the passage of time made a prosecution nearly impossible. Many of those cold cases remain unsolved today, with his name still sitting high on the suspect list. Detectives who worked the case later admitted his actual victim count may never truly be known. Armstrong is currently locked up in Michigan, serving multiple life sentences. He has shown absolutely no remorse, and despite doing countless interviews over the decades, he has never offered details that could bring closure to any unconfirmed victims' families. His chilling case eventually became the subject of several true crime documentaries, including episodes on Investigation Discovery's Very Bad Men and Oxygen's Twisted Killers, where experts analyzed his cruel methods and the dark psychology behind his actions. This terrifying case serves as a quiet reminder that evil rarely announces itself with a warning. Often, it wears a normal face, speaks in soft tones, and hides in plain sight. For his victims and the families left with unanswered questions, his arrest did bring a form of justice. But it could never heal the pain, and while his crimes happened in the dark, another Detroit monster was about to strike in broad daylight. His violence was sudden, random, and driven by dark delusions that even he could not fully comprehend. Case number 8. Dantai Raone Smith. The sun had not yet risen over northwest Detroit when the first gunshots shattered the quiet. It was Sunday morning, August 28, 2022, and the city was still asleep. Church services would not start for hours. Families were resting, and the streets remained silent. But for 2.5 hours that summer morning, terror swept through residential blocks like an unexpected storm. 3 people would lose their lives. A 4th survived only by sheer luck. And by the time police caught the killer, the entire city was terrified, wondering if they or their loved ones would be next. 19-year-old Dantai Ramon Smith had no criminal record. To friends, he was just another teenager getting by in Detroit. But on that August morning, something deep inside his mind fractured completely. Family members later revealed that Smith believed the world was ending, suffering through a severe, paranoid, schizophrenic episode, convinced that the strangers he saw on the street were trying to kill him. What followed was a violent rampage driven not by revenge, but by pure delusion. He was so detached from reality that he saw threats everywhere. The terror began at 4:45 in the morning on Wyoming Avenue near 7 Mile Road. 28-year-old Chain Lewis Lee was walking alone when Smith approached him. Without any provocation or warning, Smith opened fire. Lee was fatally shot. Hours later, police found Lee's body in a church doorway. He was a father, survived by a young son. No one had called 911 when it happened. It happened too quickly in a neighborhood where gunshots, tragically, were not uncommon. Smith calmly walked away, heading east. About 40 minutes later, around 5:23, residents near Margaretta Avenue heard multiple gunshots. Looking out, they saw a dark figure walking east. When police arrived, they discovered the body of 16-year-old Gia Lawrence. She had been killed. Witnesses saw a slender figure walking calmly, showing no signs of distress. It was as if the horrific act meant absolutely nothing to him. By 6:53 a.m., Smith reached the 19,700 block of Livernois Avenue. 43-year-old Lee Briscoe was at a U-Haul site, waiting for a ride to help her move. Smith walked right past her, spun around, and shot her multiple times. She collapsed instantly. She died right where she fell. A woman trying to start a new chapter on Sunday morning, gone for no reason. The final shooting occurred at 7:08 a.m. on Pennington Drive. 76-year-old John Pollock was outside walking his dog, enjoying the quiet early morning. Smith approached and without a word, shot Pollock in the leg, also hitting his dog in the foot. Hearing the chaos, neighbors rushed outside. One armed resident saw the attack and shot back, forcing Smith to run. That neighbor's quick thinking saved Pollock's life. He was rushed to a hospital where doctors treated his wound. Both he and his dog survived, though the trauma of that morning would haunt them forever. By this point, Detroit police connected shell casings from all 4 scenes, realizing they had an active shooter. The city was placed on alert. Schools, churches, and local businesses were warned. Residents were urged to stay indoors. Mayor Mike Duggan and Chief James White held an urgent conference, pleading for tips and warning that the active shooter was armed, extremely dangerous, and ready to strike again. About 12 hours after the first shooting, police received a tip from Smith's relative disclosing his location. Officers quickly secured a warrant and swarmed a home on Pembroke Avenue. Smith was arrested without any incident. Inside the house, they found a gun matching the ballistic evidence from all 4 crime scenes. The weapon that had terrorized Detroit for hours was secured, and the killer was finally behind bars. Smith faced 3 counts of first-degree premeditated offenses and 1 count of assault with intent to cause harm. He was also charged with animal cruelty for shooting the dog and 5 felony firearm counts. His arraignment was incredibly swift. Magistrate Jeffrey Kleiper ordered him held without bond due to his mental state. Prosecutor Kim Worthy later described the rampage as something straight out of a horror movie, stating that Smith had unleashed actual terror upon the residents of Northwest Detroit. Throughout the legal proceedings, Smith's defense attorney, Maria Manarino, the defense argued her client was battling a severe mental health crisis during the attack. She explained that Smith had paranoid schizophrenia, truly believing that random strangers on the street posed a threat to his life. In his mind, those innocent pedestrians were out to destroy him, she told the quiet courtroom. A heartbreaking tragedy all around. In January 2025, Smith pleaded guilty but mentally ill to second-degree charges, admitting both his crimes and his broken mind. Yet, this deal spared grieving families an agonizing trial while ensuring he received psychiatric treatment behind bars. On February 28, 2025, he was sentenced to 28 to 50 years, with parole eligibility after 30 years. The judge remarked that while the defendant's mental illness was mitigating, the innocent lives taken and the deep trauma left behind could never be ignored. During the emotional hearing, victims' families spoke out, describing the agony of losing their loved ones to brutal, senseless violence, the terrifying panic that seized the neighborhood that morning, and the scars on a community forced to wonder if stepping outside meant never returning to those who loved them. At a vigil weeks later, survivor John Palak called for unity, urging the community to come together and address the dual crises of local violence and untreated mental illness. The tragic case of Dantai Ramon Smith exposed a massive gap in how cities handle severe mental health crises before they spiral out of control. It forced tough, uncomfortable questions about healthcare access, prompt psychiatric intervention, and the dangerous intersection of untreated disease and easy weapon access. For the grieving families of Chayne Lewis Lee, Lee Briscoe, and Gia Lawrence, no answers could ever restore their shattered lives. For Detroit, it was a haunting lesson that violence does not always spring from pure malice. Sometimes it erupts from minds entirely severed from reality. Yet, as dark as Smith's story was, an unfolding suburban mystery would soon prove that the most predatory monsters are often those who hide their darkest intentions behind deep patience, cruel manipulation, and perfect normalcy. Case 9. Floyd Galloway, Jr. A young woman stepped out of her office on a chilly Friday evening in December 2016, keys in hand, excited to grab dinner with her best friend. Danielle Stislicki was 28, working at a MetLife office in Southfield, with plans for the weekend. She texted her friend that she would swing by her apartment first, then meet up around 6 in the evening. But Danielle never showed up. Within 24 hours, police found her Jeep Renegade parked mere feet from her Farmington Hills apartment door, her purse and identification still inside. Her phone and keys were completely gone. And 8 years later, her body has still never been found. From day one, detectives suspected an acquaintance, noting there were absolutely no signs of a struggle in the office parking lot. No physical evidence suggested she had been abducted by force from her workplace. Witnesses recalled seeing her vehicle leave the complex that night, with one person claiming a mysterious figure sat in the passenger seat. That chilling detail changed everything. Investigators began vetting everyone with building access, tracing anyone who might have crossed paths with Danielle that afternoon. One name kept coming up: Floyd Galloway, Jr., a security guard assigned to that very same office building. Galloway was 30 years old back then, married, and by all accounts, living a completely quiet, normal life. But co-workers later revealed to police that the security guard had developed a highly unusual obsession with her. He sent flowers, constantly sought her out, and forced awkward conversations to make it obvious that he was deeply attracted to her. Danielle remained polite but guarded, never encouraging his unwanted advances. On December 2, 2016, witnesses spotted Galloway in the dark parking lot, hovering over his Buick Regal with the hood popped open, pretending he had car trouble. Danielle was seen walking right toward him, which was the final confirmed moment she was ever seen alive. When detectives questioned Galloway, his alibi instantly fell apart. He claimed he worked until 11 that night and never saw her. But investigators quickly discovered that he had not even worked that Friday. He had called in sick for a doctor appointment. His cover story shattered. Cell phone records proved their devices were side by side that evening, traveling together from her Southfield office directly to Galloway's home in Berkeley. And then, back again. Security footage from a nearby Tim Hortons also placed Galloway's car in that exact area right when Danielle disappeared. Cab records proved Galloway took a taxi that night from a location right near where her Jeep was ultimately abandoned. On December 9, 2016, exactly 1 week after she vanished, Galloway sat for a polygraph test run by James Hopp, a former FBI agent hired by Galloway's lawyer. During the test, Galloway let slip something so chilling that Hopp broke protocol and called his close friend, Troy Police Chief Gary Mayer, leaking secrets that should have stayed locked away. Hopp warned the mayor that he had urgent, critical information about the security guard and the case. The mayor passed the tip to Farmington Hills Police Chief Charles Nebus, who led the investigation. With that lead, Detectives secured search warrants for Galloway's home, car, and phone. Inside his house, investigators found a patch of carpet that had been freshly replaced. Forensic tests on the original carpet revealed traces of Danielle's DNA. Inside Galloway's van, they uncovered more forensic evidence connecting him to her. Near Danielle's apartment, officers found her discarded Fitbit, car keys, and other personal items. Security cameras placed Galloway right where those items were dumped. The evidence was staggering. But as we look closer, another chilling incident would soon drag Galloway back into custody. On September 4, 2016, 3 months before Danielle vanished, a 28-year-old woman was jogging through Hines Park in Livonia around 6 in the evening. While running along a quiet path, a man ambushed her from behind, grabbed her, and tried to assault her. She fought back wildly, managed to break free, and ran. She flagged down a driver and called the police. Police drew up a suspect sketch based on her description, but the trail went cold. In June 2017, after DNA linked Galloway to that Hines Park attack, he was arrested and charged with kidnapping and assault with intent to do great bodily harm. In November 2017, he pleaded guilty, getting 16 to 35 years. During the sentencing, the survivor faced him directly, declaring that while he disrupted her day, he never broke her spirit. She told him to remember her freedom while he rots behind bars. The Stislicki family watched from the gallery, seeing the man they believed took their daughter finally face justice, though not yet for Danielle. For 2 years, the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office refused to charge him in Danielle's case, pointing to the lack of a body and doubting if the evidence would secure a conviction. Her family grew deeply frustrated. The public lost patience. Then, in March 2019, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nestle took over the case and acted. The evidence was sufficient. On March 5, 2019, Floyd Galloway Jr. was charged with first-degree premeditated murder in Danielle's case. The hearing began in September 2019, following a 2-day preliminary hearing with testimony from 15 witnesses and 45 exhibits. Judge James Brady ruled there was ample probable cause to send Galloway to trial. Phone records, security video, DNA evidence, witness accounts, and Galloway's own lies to investigators all pointed to his guilt. Brady pointed out that even though Danielle's body was never found, the evidence strongly suggested Galloway lured her to his home that December night, killed her there, and hid her remains in a place that has never been discovered. But the road to justice was incredibly messy. The prosecution became locked in bitter legal battles over the evidence gathered from that polygraph. Examiner's breach of trust. Defense lawyers argued that any evidence found because of that leaked tip, including Danielle's Fitbit, keys, security footage, and phone logs, must be thrown out because it violated Galloway's attorney-client privilege and right to due process. Lower courts agreed, ruling that most of the key evidence was completely inadmissible. The Michigan Attorney General appealed multiple times, even taking the fight to the United States Supreme Court, which ultimately refused to rule on it. Eventually, Oakland County Circuit Court Judge Phyllis McMillan ordered that a new, untainted prosecutor take over the case. In 2026, Floyd Galloway Jr. remains behind bars, serving his sentence for the park assault while awaiting trial for Danielle's case. A trial date was set for February 2026. Nearly 10 years after Danielle vanished. Her loved ones have endured endless delays, procedural fights, and frustrating legal setbacks, clinging to the hope that they will finally get answers. Danielle's mother, Anne, has admitted that she's losing sight of her daughter as a person amid all these cold legal battles. Instead of focusing on the victim, the spotlight has shifted entirely to legal technicalities. Floyd Galloway has never revealed where Danielle's remains are hidden. Experts believe he will keep quiet unless he is offered a massive deal to talk. Without her body, the Stislicki family has been unable to hold a funeral, say goodbye, or find closure. Every silent day without answers is just another day stolen by the monster who took their daughter. The case is a grim reminder that delayed justice feels like denial, and that procedural rules, though vital, can shield the guilty as easily as they protect the innocent. Yet, her family's relentless fight stands as a testament, refusing to let the world ever forget Danielle, her laughter, her kindness, and the bright future stolen from her one dark December night. But as this family waits for their day in court, another Detroit case highlights an ongoing struggle against domestic violence, a nightmare behind closed doors where love turns into toxic control, and leaving becomes the most dangerous move of all. Case 10, DeAndre Booker. The new year had barely started, and January 2nd, 2025, was supposed to be completely normal. Just errands and groceries, the simple chores that usually fill a Thursday afternoon. For 30-year-old Ashley Elkins, a mother of two from Warren, Michigan, it seemed like any other day. She left that morning, promising her family she would be right back. But Ashley never returned. Within 24 hours, her panicked family reported her missing. Days later, her ex-boyfriend was locked up. By the time charges came down, detectives were certain they had solved the mystery. This was true even though her body remained missing. 33-year-old DeAndre Booker was her former partner, and though their relationship was over, a dark tension still lingered between them. Loved ones later described a toxic dynamic, fueled by the intense jealousy and obsession that takes hold when someone refuses to let go. Ashley had finally moved on, focusing on her kids and putting her life back together. But for Booker, the breakup was something his ego simply could not accept. And on that cold January day, prosecutors allege his obsession turned deadly. On January 7, 2025, police raided Booker's apartment. What they uncovered was deeply unsettling, starting with evidence hidden in the bathroom. Forensic testing later confirmed that the DNA belonged to Ashley Elkins. The scene pointed to a violent struggle, followed by frantic attempts to clean up and hide the crime. Booker was quickly arrested and charged with lying to police during a violent crime investigation. Held without bond, he sat in the Montcalm County Jail, while detectives worked to build their case. Over the next few weeks, the investigation blew wide open. Detectives tracked Booker's movements, even analyzing GPS logs from the trash trucks that serviced his apartment complex. They discovered that on the night of January 2nd, the very day Ashley vanished, Booker had ordered 30-gallon trash bags, heavy-duty cleaning solution, and latex gloves through a delivery app. The package was delivered at 11:46 p.m., a detail prosecutors claim is crucial to the timeline. Detectives also dug into Booker's search history from the days right after Ashley went missing. The history revealed a man plotting an escape, researching routes out of Michigan, and looking up tips on how to run from the law. He looked up whether biological evidence could be traced and how to beat a lie detector test. To prosecutors, these searches clearly showed a guilty mind trying to escape the consequences. Ashley's abandoned car was eventually discovered a few miles from Booker's home. This placed him as the last person to see her alive. Police quickly began interviewing witnesses. They grabbed security footage and analyzed phone records. Though wide-scale searches across several counties failed to find her body, the overwhelming pile of evidence convinced prosecutors they had enough to move forward. On January 30th, 2025, DeAndre Booker was formally charged with first-degree premeditated murder in her case, alongside tampering with evidence, concealing a death, altering or moving human remains, and lying directly to a police officer. If convicted, he faces a potential sentence of life in prison. At his hearing, Judge Aliyah Haki denied bond, agreeing that Booker was a major flight risk and an active danger to the community. He sat behind bars waiting. In August 2025, a long preliminary hearing finally began. For days, prosecutors laid out their evidence, including testimony from officers who described the scene inside Booker's apartment, forensic experts who detailed the DNA analysis, and loved ones who recounted Ashley's toxic relationship with him, sharing their deep fears about his behavior after they split. The evidence was so overwhelming that Judge Joseph Bodker ruled there was enough probable cause to send the case to trial in Cum County. Cum County prosecutor Peter Lucido issued a statement, emphasizing the severity of these charges and their absolute resolve to find justice for Ashley and her family. The defendant faces incredibly dark charges. Lucido noted that even though Miss Elkins remains missing, the evidence is strong enough for trial, and the state remains fully committed to ensuring that a fair trial delivers true justice. It was an honest look at a harsh truth many similar cases face, that the lack of remains does not mean a lack of evidence, and families deserve real answers, even when that crucial final piece stays hidden. By early 2026, DeAndre Booker's trial was officially moving forward. With preliminary hearings set for January 2026, the main trial was scheduled to begin later that year. Ashley's family has been at every single hearing, demanding justice, honoring her memory, and refusing to let her story be forgotten. They remember her as a loving mother, a precious daughter, and a young woman who deserved a life safe from violence. This tragic case represents a much larger crisis that continues to plague Detroit and countless other cities nationwide. It is the story of domestic abuse turning deadly. Statistics constantly prove that the absolute most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship is when a victim tries to escape. Leaving does not guarantee safety. Sometimes, it only triggers one last, tragic act of control. The Wayne County Prosecutor's Office and Michigan Police have made domestic violence cases a top priority, spotting the patterns and early warning signs, knowing that intervention is vital before things turn deadly. For Ashley Elkin's family, this trial represents a path toward accountability, but also a brutal reminder of their loss. Her kids are growing up without a mom, and her parents will never stop searching for answers. And her tragedy stands as a stark reminder that domestic abuse is never just a private family matter, but a massive crisis that demands immediate attention and resources, and a real promise to protect the vulnerable before it is too late. Currently, DeAndre Booker's case is still making its way through the justice system. But no matter the final verdict, one truth remains. Ashley Elkins mattered. Her life was precious. And this battle for justice goes far beyond a single courtroom, a single trial, or a single verdict. It is a call for society to do better, to spot the red flags, and to intervene, and to make sure no one else ends up as another name on the list of victims lost to senseless violence. In Detroit, a city shaped by both tragedy and deep resilience, these 10 stories serve as powerful reminders of lives cut short, of justice delayed but fiercely pursued, and of families who refuse to forget, and of an entire community demanding accountability, even when the odds feel completely stacked against them.